Hello everyone and welcome to BYJU'S IAS exam prep and welcome to a video on preparation strategy. Now in this video, we will be discussing about the preparation strategy for governance. So governance is mentioned under paper 2, GS paper 2 of the mains syllabus. This means that governance is primarily a mains oriented topic, though there have been situations where a couple of questions have been asked from some topics which have a coverage in both polity and governance. Nevertheless, this topic is primarily oriented towards mains, and hence we look into various aspects of how to prepare for governance. We'll start off by understanding the syllabus as to what exactly is mentioned under GS paper 2. GS paper 2 covers 4 broader topics or headings. We have polity and constitution, then we have governance, we have social justice and international relations. So a point of concern here is governance. Now we look at the syllabus, we'll see the broad contours of what UPSC expects from the aspirant, and then we'll also see the finer details of what is required in all these topics. Beyond that, we'll see some questions and we will also look into the sources, the study material, the references that you can use insofar as the preparation of governance is concerned. Let's begin our video. First up is the syllabus. Now, as far as the syllabus is concerned, this is the broader contour or the guidelines that we need to follow. Let's look into details of all these aspects mentioned. So we have firstly transparency and accountability. Now under transparency, we will be studying about the Right to Information Act. This act was passed in the year 2005 and is called the Master Key of Good Governance. So we will have to study about the law per se, the basic provisions, including the bodies like the CIC and the SIC, the Central Information Commission and the State Information Commission in respective states. Beyond that, all issues and concerns pertaining to RTI Act, all issues and concerns pertaining to transparency as well. So things like why do you need transparency, what are the advantages, so on and so forth, plus what are the problems, the issues with the law in place, and then how to overcome those issues, meaning some suggestions as well. This is how you would cover transparency. Then we have accountability. Under accountability, you will be studying and you should be studying a topic called CAG. Now, yes, CAG has an overlap. It can also be seen as a part of polity and can also be seen as a part of governance. So CAG is a constitutional body, that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So you will have to study about the various articles like Article 148 to 151, which contain provisions for the CAG. This is Chapter 5 of Part 5 of the Indian Constitution. So looking into the independence aspect of the CAG, then also looking into various kinds of audits performed by the CAG. And not just this, we will also look into again the same old story, issues and suggestions. So issues or challenges or problems and suggestions insofar as the CAG is concerned. Then we have transparency and accountability and institutional and other measures. So we also need to study about corruption. What exactly is corruption? How do you define corruption? And then how can corruption be sorted out? Dealing with corruption. Also implications of corruption. So these aspects need to be studied. Plus, you also should focus on knowing how to measure corruption. So we have the corruption perception index, We have the Global Corruption Barometer for various continents. So basic reports are things that you need to know: India's rank, the toppers, etc. Beyond that, under corruption, you should also know the most popular, the most famous law, PCA 1988, the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. So this is the law under which some of you in future are likely to be booked in case you get involved in corruption, right? And then bodies like CBI, bodies like CVC, and also Lokpal and Lokayukt. So we need to know about the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI. Again, the body, issues, concerns, etc. How to improve upon the functioning, how to make the functioning more independent of CBI. Then the CVC, the Central Vigilance Commission. This is a statutory body, a body which reports to the Parliament directly. So this body needs to be studied. Again, the issues, concerns, the suggestions on how to improve upon the functioning of CVC. Because CVC is not an investigating body, right? CVC will give recommendations on what actions can be taken against the erring officials, the senior officials, the Group A officers, right? And also similarly placed officers in the PSBs and the PSUs. However, the CVC can also look into the aspects pertaining to Group B, C and D officials if the Lokpal so makes a reference, that is as per the section 8A and 8B of the Lokpal and Lokayukt Act of 2013. Then the Lokpal and Lokayukt Act, which was finally passed in 2013 after 8 failed attempts in the country. So we need to know each and every provision of the Lokpal Act as well as a general knowledge of the provisions of Lokayukts, because there is a lot of structural variation as far as Lokayukts are concerned. So it could be slightly difficult to mug up every aspect, but we need to know what are the general shortcomings insofar as Lokayukts are concerned. And then when it comes to the interview, you can fully focus on the performance of Lokayukt of your respective states. But for mains, there can be a general question, but a state-specific question is extremely unlikely. That's all as far as the Lokpal and Lokayukt is concerned. Now you would have observed there is a topic mentioned under the syllabus, citizens' charters. Now these can be seen as an aspect of both transparency and accountability. Citizens' charters. We need to study what are citizens' charters and how to improve upon the service delivery. CCs are basically public statements defining the entitlements of citizens. It enshrines a trust between the service provider and of course the user. This is what is a citizens' charter. So when did it start? What are the vision and mission statements? What are the elements of Indian CC program, right? What are the elements of original charter program as devised in UK 1991? And then how to improve upon the existing shortcomings in the citizens' charters. Beyond that, we should also remember the 7-step Sevottam framework, the service delivery excellence model. So this is what you should cover as far as this broader topic of transparency and accountability is concerned. And let's look at some questions. For example, in 2019, RTI Act was modified and we made some changes in the body, the CIC, the SIC, their terms and conditions of service. And not that year, but next year, UPSC asked a question in mains. Recent amendments to the RTI, the Right to Information Act, will have profound impact on the autonomy and independence of Information Commission. Discuss. So you see how the question is primarily based on a very current event, a change which took place in the RTI regime. So current event based questions are the primary focus on governance. Of course, the base of every topic eventually is the static information. But how to correlate with the current events is why current affairs becomes important. Then a question on, say, CAG, asked in 2018. The CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General, has a very vital, a very important role to play. Explain how this is reflected in the method and terms of his appointment, as well as the range of powers he can exercise. So you have to mention about the constitutional provisions under Article 148 with respect to the appointment, how this person's appointment per se may not be independent, but there are other provisions under Article 148 which ensure that CAG performs his function freely, independent of external control, and then also mention the powers, the range of powers he or she can exercise, be it the important functions they perform or the types of audits they perform, including examples of propriety audits. So this is how a question can be framed from CAG, or a question on CBI asked just in 2021. Now, as far as CBI is concerned, the issue with respect to CBI and the independence thereof has been under radar and discussion for a long period of time. Right from the Vineet Narayan case of 1997, there has always been a concern. Now, finally, UPSC thought it's a good time to ask a question on CBI because since 2018, we had been witnessing, especially in the media, the rise of debates on how the states are taking back their consent, because primarily public order and police functions are stateless subjects, entry 1 and entry 2 of stateless subjects. So the CBI requires consent to come inside a state and investigate. So a lot of states, including say Andhra Pradesh or West Bengal, Rajasthan, they started taking back their consent, the general consent, and they said, we will give a consent on a case-to-case basis. This became the cause of a question in 2021. The jurisdiction of CBI regarding lodging an FIR and conducting a probe within a particular state is being questioned by various states. However, the power of the states to withhold consent to the CBI is not absolute. See the twist in the question. The question agrees that yes, the states are using this, and yes, the states are questioning it, withholding the consent, but this is not absolute. You have to discuss this and explain this with special reference to the federal character of India. Now, as far as the federal character of India is concerned, we have to understand that there are some aspects that you need to mug up. Things like the federal features, the unitary features, and especially the unitary features. Why? Because it is these unitary features which cause a lot of confrontation between the center and the states. Unitary meaning all those features of our constitution, of our form of government, which ensure that center has more powers. And this is a reason why we call, and at least a lot of people call, our constitution, our framework as, say, quasi-federal, right? This is a very popular phrase used, given by Casey Weary, or Sir Ivor Jennings has referred to this structure as a federation with a very strong centralizing tendency. Or C.H. Alexandrovich, who calls this a federation sui generis. Sui generis meaning of its own kind. This definitely means one thing, that our center is strong. So states don't have this absolute right to prevent the central body from coming in and inquiring and investigating. So this was a mix of governance. CBI is the body, current events plus primarily focusing on the static portion, that is the federal provisions, the unitary provisions of the constitution. So again, an example of how current events can be linked to static knowledge or information. Now coming to the second aspect, this is important aspects of governance. So here you should be focusing on what exactly is governance. How do you define this term governance? Firstly, the definition, then terms like good governance. It's extremely important to know what exactly is good governance. And not just that, there are 8 essential characteristics of good governance. Things like it should be participatory, consensus oriented, there should be transparency, accountability, responsiveness, effective and efficient, rule of law, so on and so forth. Know all these 8 characteristics, extremely important. Then terms like smart government, simple, moral, accountable, responsive and transparent. So knowing all about governance, what is governance, definition of governance, good governance, and not to forget the Good Governance Index. This index is released by the DARPG. This is the Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. So we have this ministry called Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions. This ministry has 3 departments, of which one is of no concern to you as of now, the Ministry of Pensioners' Welfare and Pensions. That is of no concern to us as of now. But yes, DARPG's other department, that is the Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. This talks about all these indexes like the Good Governance Index or the E-Governance Survey or even the second ARC reports. And the third one, which could be of importance to you if you clear the exam and become an IAS officer, the DOPT, Department of Personnel and Training, because that's the cadre controlling authority for the IAS officers in the country. Anyway, so DARPG has released the Good Governance Index, and we should know the ranking of various states plus basic elements of what exactly is being covered under good governance. So this is important aspects of governance. And then we have e-governance, applications, models, success, limitations, and potential. So basically, again, what is e-governance? And primarily the issues and how to address those issues and concerns. Plus, since the models of e-governance as a topic is mentioned, critical information flow model or the e-lobbying model or the broadcasting model. So these models are things that you should also be aware of. Okay. And under e-governance, what is extremely important is to know the challenges in the country that people face when it comes to launching e-governance projects or e-governance or the use of ICT, information and communication technology in general. So this is e-governance. And of course, we also have to remember the survey, that is the e-governance survey called the National E-Governance Service Delivery Assessment. This is again done by DARPG. And the last survey was conducted in June 2022. The survey was conducted in 2021, but the result was published in June 2022. And this survey comprehensively covers not just the states, but also the central government portals and the service portals of central government ministries. And this time in the survey, the people were also asked questions on how effective e-governance has been, and questions like how far have they been using e-governance, what are the areas of concerns that they face, so on and so forth. Those can be very interesting points of observation which can also be incorporated in your answers on improving, addressing the concerns. Because whenever you have to improve upon the functioning, we have to address the societal concerns, the issues, the challenges that people face in general. So, e-governance. Then, a question on e-governance, for example, in Mains 2019, this question was asked: implementation of ICT-based projects or programs usually suffers in terms of certain vital factors. Identify those factors and also suggest measures for their effective implementation. So firstly, you have to identify those factors, meaning what are the issues that you may face when e-governance projects or any project, any program is being launched using ICT, information and communication technology. Things like digital divide, lack of trust, lack of training, digital literacy, capacity building of staff, geographical factors could be a cause of concern. There are so many aspects, lack of vernacular content, etc. And then address those concerns. So questions on e-governance primarily along these lines. And then one of the by far most interesting and important topics, at least for you, is the role of civil services in a democracy. So this is the topic under which you should know what role is expected of you, people like you. But mind you, when I say civil servants, please don't have a narrow vision that I am referring to only, or rather the syllabus is referring to only Group A services. We are referring to the entire gamut of civil servants, right from Group A to Group D. This includes the secretary, the additional secretary, the joint secretary, the deputy, the undersecretary, the sections officers, the assistants, the clerks, the UDCs, LDCs, then the Group D, the Safai Karmcharis, Daftaris, peons. Every civil servant is concerned here, and every civil servant is covered here. So what is a role that is expected of you? Role of civil services. So here, firstly, the role, things like the role of neutrality that is expected. Every civil servant should be neutral. Role of impartiality, role of effectiveness, role of commitment, all these things. And then also very important is to ensure that you know two things. The issues pertaining to civil servants, right? Whether it is the frequent transfers, lack of training for all staff, the performance appraisal not being very genuine, or even the training parameters or the recruitment issues which are very old, obsolete and archaic. And then suggestions or the reform in civil services. Extremely important. So reforms say along structure, along staffing, along training, right? Along performance management, reforms along the culture of civil services. All these need to be focused upon. Under this broader heading, you should also focus on the All India services. So All India services are as of now 3 services. The one IAS, the administrative, the police service, and the Indian Forest Service, not foreign forest service. These 3 are the All India services as of now. So we need to know, why did we have All India services in the first place? The steel frame argument put forward by Lloyd George, the UK Prime Minister, and was later used by Sardar Patel to convince the Constituent Assembly the importance of All India servants. Then also the issues, what problems do states have with respect to All India services, and then why do we need All India services? Also, why Sarkaria Commission or the Panchi Commission, chaired by the former Chief Justice of India, Madan Mohan Panchi, why have these commissions focused so much on the need and importance of All India services? All these need to be covered comprehensively under role of civil services in a democracy. And then you should also know some basic issues pertaining to civil servants. Things like the issue of vacancy, the issue of the staff strength. The total strength itself is very low, right? When you compare the number of civil servants in India to say countries like Norway and Sweden and France and Brazil, you will find that we are struggling at 16.22, whereas some of these countries are at 159 per 1,000 people. So there's a huge gap between the number of servants that we have in the country compared to some developed countries. And then the allocation and distribution of the civil servants across the board, across the states and various departments, is also a challenge that we need to address. All these topics under the role of civil services in a democracy. Largely the questions have been so far from reforms. They would give you a statement and they would want us to write on what reforms can be brought, what changes can be brought, how to improve the civil services in the country. For example, a question asked in Mains 2070. Initially, civil services in India were designed to achieve the goals of neutrality, and effectiveness, which seems to be lacking in the present context. Do you agree with the view that drastic reforms are required in civil services? Comment. So talking about the neutrality and effectiveness aspect, how neutrality has become a challenge, of course, in this modern day context with so many parties, rise of regional parties, a multi-party system in the country, it is becoming increasingly difficult to remain neutral as a civil servant. Plus, we know very well of the allegations that the entire political system is marred by issues of casteism, communalism, criminalization as well as corruption. The 4 C's which affect our political system. And within this 4 C's, you have to remain neutral and perform the functions to the best of your ability and be effective as well. So challenges therein, and then how to improve upon the existing issues and concerns. Again, the point is reforms. So do you agree with the view that drastic reforms are required? Of course, don't write yes and run away. You have to explain as well as to what kind of reforms can be incorporated, right? Then a topic which could be seen as a part of polity but would be preferable if you study under governance, because it would require you firstly to know everything about the Indian Constitution, right? So it would be beneficial if you study this topic under governance. This is the comparison of the Indian constitutional scheme with that of other countries. So primarily focus on countries like UK and USA. One parliamentary system and the other one being the presidential system. And here also, I know the Constitution of USA is very brief, very small, just 7 articles, less than 8,000 words. That's less than 2 GS papers, the entire US Constitution. But again, every state has its own constitution. Sometimes some states, like the state of Alabama, the size of the Constitution of Alabama is 3 times that of the Indian Constitution, right? So that's there. But these constitutions are very small, especially UK, which is completely scattered into various sources. So we don't need to go crazy and mug up everything. What you need to know is again establishing a link with the current events. Whatever has been the current event under discussion, you should know that aspect of it and that aspect of some leading constitutions across the globe. So this is the comparison of Indian constitutional scheme with that of other countries. To give you an example, in Mains 2020, a question was asked on the comparison between the Indian and the UK's judicial system. Of course, since 2005, we have had the Constitutional Reforms Act passed in UK, where they have created something called the JAC, the Judicial Appointments Commission. Though we also tried to create an NJAC, which was struck down by Supreme Court, though the demand for NJAC had been since 1980s. UK has a JAC. UK has a separate office called JCIO, Judicial Complaints Investigation Office. UK set up its Supreme Court in the late 2000s, finally, right? Taking away the power from the law lords in the House of Lords. And now finally, Lord Chancellor is no longer the Chief Justice. The President of the Supreme Court is now the Chief Justice. So all these changes have been incorporated, definitely. And we need to know and draw a comparative analysis between India and UK. Basic issues like judicial review, right? A limitation on judicial review in UK, Parliament being supreme. In India, we have the supremacy of the Constitution. And because judiciary interprets the Constitution, we may somewhat feel that, of course, there is something called judicial review, which is now a part of basic structure. In the Minerva Mills case, Supreme Court has accepted and has said that you cannot simply take away judicial review. They have the right to review everything. Executive actions, legislative actions, whatever. And we have seen, though, let me clarify, Supreme Court has been very, very judicious, very careful, and has never or hardly misused the provisions of basic structure doctrine. But nevertheless, Supreme Court is slightly more powerful in the country compared to other organs, which may not be the case in UK. So a question on the key points of convergence and divergence between the two nations in terms of their judicial practice, whether it is the appointment, the removal, the selection procedure, whether it is judicial review, rule of law, or even basic issues like contempt of court, where in India, it is almost impossible to get away even if the contempt of court, or rather the criticism is largely fair, it could result in possible issues being raised where a case can be slapped against you of contempt, which may not be the case in UK, where we have seen that a lot of columnists openly criticize the judiciary, even make some kind of mockery of the judiciary there through the use of cartoons, which could be difficult in India, frankly. So there are points of separation, divergence as well as convergence. So that is what you have to incorporate in such questions. Okay, this is with respect to the comparison of constitutions. And lastly, some statutory bodies. So statutory bodies, statutory or the legal body, statute simply means a law, right? If you want to impress somebody, use the word statute or else call it a law. So statutory bodies, primarily NHRC. We have seen on 3 occasions questions being asked from the Human Rights Commission or NCW, right? So extremely important are these statutory bodies, and if any statutory body has been in news a lot in the recent times, you can also add that statutory body to your list of studies. So that's how we will cover statutory bodies. To show you an example, in Mains 2021, a question asked on Human Rights Commission. And again, a very simple question. The focus was on pointing out the issues. Though the Human Rights Commissions have contributed immensely to the protection of human rights in India, yet they have failed. Failed to do what? Failed to assert themselves against the mighty and powerful. Analyzing their structural and practical limitations. Now see, in the recent times, we have seen UPSC moving out of the very comfortable zone of issues and also seeking various subtypes of issues, not just issues. I mean, in this question, you can simply start by writing in the body, the structural and practical limitations are. Of course, you can do it, but then the evaluator would come to know that this person knows nothing about what is a structural issue, what is a practical issue, right? So we have to now segregate the issues as well. That's the next step, of course, right? When you keep on asking issues, it creates a comfort zone. We have to push the aspirants beyond the comfort zone. So now we have seen questions, be it from the judiciary or from NHRC, on defining, describing, and also differentiating between types of issues. So a structural issue, the issue with respect to the structure per se, the law per se, right? For example, NHRC is not allowed to take up complaints against the armed forces, or the time frame limitation of 1 year, or NHRC not being given the status of a constitutional body. Structural issues. Practical limitations, meaning lack of funds, lack of staff being given. I mean, NHRC depends primarily on the police for investigations, right? And frankly, most of the complaints that the NHRC receives are against police authorities. Plus, police in various states themselves are grossly understaffed. And then frequent transfers of the investigating officers back to their parent body creates a problem. That is why we have seen that NHRC itself has claimed a few years back in the court that they are not able to take up more than 100 complaints a year because of lack of staff and funds. These are practical limitations. So you have to also differentiate between what's a practical limitation and what is a structural limitation, and then suggest remedial measures. One point I'd like to make here is, when you write any kind of issue, so let's say issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, it would be better that when you are writing suggestions in the next paragraph, corresponding to issue 1, your first suggestion should be, that is corresponding to the solution for problem number 1. Same should go for issue number 2. It would also keep you aligned with what you have written. And it would also reflect very nicely when you are not just somebody who is finding out faults, but also offering solutions to every specific problem, right? So this should also be incorporated. So this is all that you need to know as far as the syllabus, the type of questions, the detailed content matter of what you need to study for governance. Now, as far as sources are concerned, there are various topics which are covered under various chapters of say Lakshmikant or other books that you can selectively search for online. Beyond that, what is extremely important is following a newspaper. You can follow either the Indian Express or the Hindu, whichever you like would be okay. And then it would be better if you follow any current affairs monthly magazine, because there you'll have more specific content with a bit of backstory about the body, some general problems or functions performed by the body, right? So this is going to be the only source. When I say Lakshmikant, I mean the polity book of Lakshmikant, not the governance book, because for governance primarily and for the type of questions that we have seen from governance, there is no specific book as such which would address the needs of such questions. It is more got to do with polity overlap, knowing the bodies, knowing their functions, knowing issues, concerns, and having a proper link with the current affairs. That's what is needed as far as governance is concerned. Now, there is something called second ARC, Administrative Reforms Commission. So in 1966, we set up something called the first ARC under the chairmanship of Morarji Desai. Later on, when he resigned, under the chairmanship of Kengal Hanumantayya. 40 years down the line, in 2005, we set up the second Administrative Reforms Commission, and this is taken care of by the DARPG, the Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. Now, second ARC has 15 reports. Reports run into hundreds of pages. It is going to be extremely difficult to focus on this until and unless, if your plan is to say clear the exam in 10 years, if you're following a 5 or 10 year policy of clearing the examination, go for it. But in a limited time frame, it is not advisable to go through these reports on your own. If you find some very brief compilations for selective topics, let's say you get some compilation on right to information, the master key to good governance, or you get some compilation on ethics or local governance, that is the Panchayati Raj institutions or the municipalities, you can focus on that. But beyond that, selective Google research would be sufficient to cover governance. There seems to be no cost benefit or effectiveness of cost benefit when you study these second ARC reports. If you get the compilations, well and good. That's it as far as the sources are concerned. Now, if you have been following the exam and the questions being asked lately, there was a question in prelims which some people pointed out had a source in Instagram, a question on a type of mushroom being asked in the examination. Does it mean we also need to focus on following Instagram now, joining various handles? Of course not. Of course not. This would be unlikely. At least I would not advise doing it. You can do it at your own risk. Follow any Instagram handle you want. But this should not be seen as a part of the syllabus as well as the sources that you need to follow, right? And despite saying all these things, this is always this obsession of students to just download as many PDFs as possible, save it, never ever to open it again in your entire lifetime. So we should avoid that, right? Rather focus on the PYQs, read the basic topics, and firmly keep on following the current affairs and keep updating your notes as far as governance is concerned. This would be all that you would need to know for governance, and that is all as far as the video is concerned. That's all for me. Jai Hind.